There are lives that are celebrated, and then there are lives that are never applauded. This is the story of one such life. A life that existed quietly in the background, unseen and unacknowledged. Every morning, he woke up at the same time, not because he was disciplined, but because routine had slowly replaced hope. The alarm rang, his eyes opened, and for a few silent seconds he stared at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight settle in. Another day to get through. Another day where nothing truly changed. He was not lazy. He was not careless. He showed up on time, worked hard, and carried responsibility without complaint. Yet at work, he remained invisible. His ideas stayed in his head. His effort went unnoticed, and his name was never mentioned when success was discussed. Others moved ahead, not always because they were better, but because they were louder and more visible. What hurt him most was not failure. It was the feeling of standing still while life moved forward. Every evening, he returned home mentally exhausted, not from work, but from constant comparison. He scrolled through screens filled with progress, confidence, and achievement, wondering how everyone else seemed to find direction while he remained stuck. People told him to be patient. They said time would fix everything, but patience without direction felt like punishment, and time without growth felt dangerous. Deep down, a quiet fear followed him everywhere. What if this was all his life would ever become? One night, sitting alone in silence, he stopped distracting himself. No phone, no noise, just honesty. And in that honesty, he realized something uncomfortable. He was not angry at the world. He was angry at himself for slowly accepting a life he never wanted. That realization did not motivate him. It unsettled him, because it meant change was possible, and avoidance had been a choice. He did not know how to change yet, but he knew one thing clearly. Continuing like this was no longer an option. The next morning looked exactly the same, but something inside him had shifted. Not excitement, not confidence, just a quiet resolve. A promise he did not say out loud, but felt deeply. This would not be his final version. The awareness he carried into the next day did not feel powerful. It felt heavy. Nothing around him had changed, yet everything inside him felt exposed. At work, he noticed how often he waited to be told what to do, waited for approval, waited for the right moment, and for the first time, he realized that no one was stopping him. The limits he felt so strongly were not created by others. They were built quietly by his own hesitation. That realization was uncomfortable, because it removed blame. If the problem was external, he could complain. If the problem was internal, he had to take responsibility. Responsibility felt intimidating, but it also felt honest. That evening, instead of distracting himself, he sat down with a blank notebook. The pages felt unfamiliar, almost accusing, as if they had been waiting for years. He wrote a single sentence at the top. What am I avoiding? The answer came slowly at first, then all at once. He avoided difficult conversations. He avoided learning things that made him feel stupid. He avoided being seen, because being seen meant being judged. As he wrote, a painful truth emerged. He was not afraid of effort. He was afraid of exposure. As long as he did not fully try, he could protect himself from the possibility of real failure. That night, he understood why motivation never lasted. Motivation depended on emotion, and emotion was unreliable. What he needed was not inspiration, but structure, something that would carry him forward on days when belief was absent. He stopped thinking in terms of big goals and started thinking in terms of standards. Not dreams, but rules he would no longer negotiate with. The following days tested him immediately. Waking up early felt uncomfortable. Speaking up felt unnatural. Doubt followed him closely, reminding him how easy it would be to return to his old habits. But each time, he acted despite discomfort. Something small changed. Not in the world around him, but in how he saw himself. He did not feel confident. He felt accountable, and accountability, he realized, was stronger than motivation. Slowly, he stopped asking how he felt and started asking what this version of himself would do. That shift removed emotion from the process. Progress became quiet, imperfect, and consistent. He knew the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, he was no longer waiting to be saved. He had accepted something far more powerful. If his life was going to change, it would be because he chose to change it. Motivation did not stay with him for long. After the initial awareness faded, the days began to feel ordinary again. Some mornings he woke up tired, not physically, but mentally. His mind searched for excuses that sounded reasonable. Skip today. Start tomorrow. One day will not matter. He realized something uncomfortable. Most people do not fail because they are weak. They fail because their excuses sound intelligent. Instead of fighting those thoughts, he changed his approach. He stopped asking himself how he felt. Feelings were unstable, and he had relied on them for too long. He replaced feelings with rules. Simple, unexciting rules that remove choice. Wake up at the same time. Work on one difficult thing. Finish what you start. These rules did not inspire him, but they kept him honest. At first, discipline felt mechanical and empty. There was no excitement, no reward, no visible progress. But something strange happened over time. When decisions were already made, his mind felt quieter. He wasted less energy negotiating with himself. Action became easier, not because it felt good, but because it was expected. Some days were harder than others. On those days, he did less, but he never did nothing. He learned that consistency mattered more than intensity. Perfection had always slowed him down. Progress required sustainability. Slowly, his days became predictable, and predictability became strength. He noticed changes that were easy to miss. He reacted less emotionally. He was harder to distract. Silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt useful. In that silence, he confronted thoughts he once avoided, doubts he once escaped. Instead of running from them, he worked anyway. One evening, after completing a long and tiring day, he felt something unfamiliar. Calm. Not happiness. Not excitement. Calm. It came from alignment, from doing what needed to be done, even when no one was watching. He understood then that discipline was not punishment, it was self-respect. Motivation, he realized, was only useful at the beginning. Discipline was what carried people forward, and slowly, without announcing it, discipline stopped feeling like effort. It became identity. He was no longer trying to change his life. He was changing who he was. As his habits changed, his relationships began to change with them. Not suddenly, and not intentionally. It happened quietly. Conversations that once felt normal started to feel repetitive. Jokes felt empty. Distractions felt heavier than before. He still cared about people, but he no longer escaped with them. Some friends noticed the change. They said he was too serious now, that he needed to relax, that life was not meant to be taken this seriously. They were not trying to hurt him. They were protecting their comfort, and comfort does not like to be challenged. He learned a difficult truth. When you raise your standards, you automatically lower your tolerance for excuses, not just your own, but everyone else's. He stopped explaining his choices, stopped justifying his discipline, not because he felt superior, but because he no longer needed permission to grow. Slowly, distance appeared. No arguments, no dramatic endings, just silence where connection used to be. At first, that silence hurt. He questioned himself. Was he becoming cold? Was he losing people he should be holding on to? Loneliness can be confusing when it looks like progress. There were evenings he missed laughter, missed familiarity, missed the comfort of being understood without effort. But he also noticed something important. He no longer felt drained after conversations. Silence had become peaceful instead of empty. Spending time alone forced him to face parts of himself he had ignored for years. His values, his boundaries, his fears. He realized boundaries were not walls meant to push people away. They were filters meant to protect what mattered. One night, he left a conversation that had lasted over an hour, yet said nothing meaningful. As he walked away, he felt empty, not sad. That emptiness taught him something powerful. Connection without alignment is exhausting. He understood why he had stayed in many relationships longer than he should have. Fear of being alone had always been stronger than respect for himself. Growth demanded that he face that fear instead of running from it. Not everyone left. A few stayed quietly. They did not question his change or demand explanations. They respected it. He learned to value those people deeply, because real support does not require proof. Loneliness did not disappear, but it changed shade. It no longer felt like rejection. It felt like transition. He was between versions of himself. And that space was uncomfortable. People escape it. He stayed. And in staying, he discovered something he had never felt before. Peace. Not excitement. Not happiness. Peace. The kind that comes from living in alignment with who you are becoming. He was not lonely anymore. He was selective. And that difference changed everything. For a long time, discipline seemed to protect him. Then failure arrived and stripped everything bare. It did not come loudly or suddenly. It arrived slowly, through effort that produced no result. He had committed fully to a path that felt right. He had sacrificed comfort, time, and certainty. For the first time, he allowed himself to expect progress. And when nothing happened, the disappointment cut deeper than he expected. At first, he tried to stay composed. He followed his routines without presence, completing tasks without belief. But something had shifted. The quiet voice he thought he had left behind returned. It reminded him of every doubt he ever carried. It asked him whether all this effort had been a mistake, whether trying had only made the pain sharper. One evening, exhaustion caught up with him. He sat alone and did nothing. No planning, no discipline, no distraction, just silence. That silence felt dangerous, because it felt familiar. It was the same place he had been before, the place where quitting begins quietly. He felt embarrassed, not publicly, but internally, embarrassed for believing effort would guarantee outcome, for thinking discipline alone was enough. The thought that hurt the most was simple and cruel. At least before, he did not expect anything. That night, sleep did not come easily. His mind replayed every sacrifice, every lonely decision, every moment he chose effort over comfort. And then a different realization surfaced. This pain was not proof that he had failed. It was proof that he had tried honestly. For the first time, he separated his identity from the result. He was not the failure. The approach had failed. That distinction mattered more than he realized. He opened his notebook again and asked himself one question. What did this experience teach me? The answer was not flattering, but it was valuable. He had pushed without reflection. He had relied on persistence when adjustment was required. Failure was not telling him to quit. It was telling him to slow down and learn. The next morning, he returned to his routine without emotion. No excitement, no disappointment, just humility. He let go of timelines and expectations. He focused on understanding instead of forcing outcomes. And something unexpected happened. The weight lifted. Failure had taken something from him, but it had also given him clarity. He no longer needed guarantees. He only needed endurance. He understood then that the real goal was never success. It was becoming someone who could fail without quitting. And that understanding changed everything. After that failure, something inside him hardened, but not in a bitter way. It became steady. He stopped rushing and stopped trying to prove anything. The urgency that once controlled him faded, replaced by patience. He moved forward more slowly, now, but with intention. Every action felt deliberate, grounded, and quiet. He noticed that he spoke less than before, not because he had nothing to say, but because he no longer needed to explain himself. He listened more carefully, observed more deeply. His confidence no longer came from words, but from consistency. People around him felt the change before they understood it. He realized that most people confuse movement with progress. They stay busy, but directionless. He had lived that way once. Now, he respected simplicity. He focused on fewer things and did them well. Discipline no longer felt like force. It felt natural, almost automatic. Opportunities began to appear, small and unimpressive at first. Before, he would have ignored them, waiting for something bigger. Now, he understood the power of accumulation. He accepted responsibility without expectation, knowing that responsibility builds trust, and trust builds influence. He became harder to distract, harder to pull back into old habits. Comfort no longer tempted him the way it once had, not because life was easier, but because his standards were higher. Mediocrity lost its grip on him, not through aggression, but through irrelevance. Criticism affected him differently now. He no longer took it personally. He evaluated it. If it helped, he used it. If it did not, he let it go. Emotion was no longer in control. Values were. This gave him clarity in decisions and calm in pressure. Some people mistook his calm for detachment. Others mistook it for confidence. Both were partially true. He was no longer desperate to be understood, because he understood himself. That self-awareness grounded him in a way nothing else had. Late one evening, he reflected on how far he had come. Not in achievements, but in behavior. The man who once needed motivation now relied on purpose. The man who once feared failure now respected it. He was not finished, and he was not successful yet, but he had become dangerous to the life he once accepted. And once a person outgrows mediocrity, there is no return. For a long time, he imagined success as a powerful feeling. He thought it would arrive with excitement, relief, and a clear sense of victory. But when progress finally showed itself, it felt different. There was no sudden happiness, no dramatic moment. What arrived instead was stability. Life did not become easy, but it became manageable. Decisions no longer felt overwhelming. Problems still appeared, but they no longer created panic. He noticed it in small details. Mornings began without dread. Silence felt normal. His thoughts felt clearer. People started treating him differently, not with admiration, but with trust. They relied on his judgment, asked for his opinion, respected his consistency. Yet even then, he felt no rush, no need to celebrate, because the real change had already happened inside him. He realized something important. Success feels empty when you expect it to fix you. It only feels meaningful when you no longer need it for validation. The confidence he carried now did not come from achievement. It came from alignment, from knowing he could trust himself. He saw others still chasing success desperately, believing it would save them from insecurity or doubt. He understood now that success only amplifies who you already are. It does not replace identity. That realization humbled him and kept him grounded. There were moments of pride, but they were calm. He did not feel above anyone. He felt responsible. He treated progress like something to protect, not something to show off. Ego, he learned, invites collapse. Loneliness still existed, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt intentional. He was comfortable being alone, because he was comfortable with himself. That comfort changed his presence. People felt safe around him, entertained, and safety creates influence. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who felt invisible and uncertain. He did not feel regret, he felt respect. That version had endured confusion without quitting, and that endurance had built everything that followed. Success, he understood, was not a finish line. It was a maintenance phase, a commitment to protect habits, values, and standards every day. This was not the end of the journey, but he was finally walking without fear of falling. And that, he realized, was real success. At some point, the struggle stopped feeling like a battle and started feeling like responsibility. Not responsibility forced on him by life, but responsibility he chose to carry. He understood that life does not reward intentions. It responds to patterns, to what you do repeatedly, especially when no one is watching. Looking back, he saw how much time he had wasted waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel confident, waiting for the right moment. He realized that most people are not held back by lack of ability, but by avoidance. They wait for certainty in a world that never offers it. He learned that power is often misunderstood. It is not dominance, control, or loud confidence. Real power is self-control. The ability to act even when fear is present. The ability to stay consistent when motivation disappears. The ability to keep promises to yourself. Life still presented problems. Uncertainty never disappeared, but fear lost its grip. Not because he became fearless, but because he trusted his ability to respond. capability replaced anxiety. He no longer needed life to feel safe. He needed himself to be reliable. Motivation had become irrelevant. He no longer depended on emotion to move forward. He operated on standards, values, and self-respect. Those things did not fluctuate with mood. They grounded him when life became unpredictable. He understood a simple truth. Dreams inspire people, but habits decide outcomes. Everyone dreams. Few commit. The price of discipline is discomfort now. The price of avoiding it is regret. Later, he had learned to choose the lighter burden. As he moved through the world, he noticed something subtle. People listened when he spoke, not because he demanded attention, but because his words were aligned with his actions. Influence followed consistency, not volume. He no longer needed applause. Quietly built strength rarely receives it. The approval that mattered had already happened inside him. He had become someone he respected. Someone who did not quit when quitting felt reasonable. He thought of the man he once was, invisible, uncertain, waiting for permission. He did not feel shame. He felt gratitude. That version had survived long enough to choose change. The final truth was simple and uncomfortably honest. You do not change your life by wishing. You change it by choosing. Choosing discipline over comfort. Choosing responsibility over excuses. Choosing long-term self-respect over short-term relief. Those choices are quiet, often lonely, rarely celebrated, but they work. And when you stop quitting on yourself, life begins to respond differently, not all at once, not dramatically, but consistently. That is how real strength is built, quiet, repeatedly, without applause. And once built, it cannot be taken from you.